Hey there. So what we're about to do is to walk you through validating your Myers-Briggs Type Indicator personality type. You've already taken MyPlan.com assessments in terms of your values, interests, personality, and skills. And so what I want you to have right now is your personality results from that. That should be a 4-letter code, and it's going to be E or I, N or S, T or P, T or F, I'm sorry, and J or P. And so you should have those letters all together from myplan.com, and we'll be seeing if those are actually accurate for you or not. Whenever you take any kind of a test like these that you took on MyPlan, there's possibilities of things like your environment or your mood that day and other factors changing how you kind of respond to those questions. And so this is one more thorough way of looking at your personality and making sure that we're calling you by the right types so that when you use that information to decide on careers or to just better understand yourself in the world of work and life in general, you'll have more accurate information. So I'm going to walk you through some different exercises. Let me pull up the slides to do that. What we'll do is actually have you pause at times while I do this so that you can complete the activities. Make it just a little bit bigger for you. So these slides are posted on Canvas for you, and they actually have a couple of different components. I'm not going to, in this video, go through the strengths in terms of your interests. The strong is what I mean to say. Strength is a completely separate assessment, but is also very useful, the Clifton Strength Assessment. But that's not something we're actually using in this course at this time. Maybe one day I'll integrate that. So what the slides do have here is the Myers-Briggs Type Indicator and the Strong Interest Inventory. This video only covers the Myers-Briggs. The Myers-Briggs, the MBTI stands for Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. It's a tool that's based on Jungian psychology, if any of you have taken a psychology class. It was actually extended into this personality assessment based on the types that he devised. Mother-daughter pair Catherine Briggs and Isabel Briggs Myers are the ones who developed it into this test, and since then it has been very well validated with lots and lots of research. There's actually a book for those who are assessing this in career counseling settings, and I've used this book before. It's full of all kinds of great information about how your type responds to different situations, pairings of types, such as romantic partnerships or even work partnerships, and how you can expect those relationships to go according to the types that you have. So they really can be used to help you better understand and navigate the world of career and the rest of your life too. To do our validation activities, I first want to start with just a little quick one and have you sign your name. So take that pen or pencil that you have and the paper that you have ready to go. Sign your name about 5 times, just as if you were signing a check. Pause the video while you do that. Okay, so you've signed your name as if you were signing a check 5 times. Now, you probably did that with your dominant hand. I want you to switch to your non-dominant hand and do the same activity. Go ahead and pause while you do that. So you just signed your name 5 times with your dominant hand and 5 times with your non-dominant hand as if you were signing a check. Think about how you might describe each of those experiences. You probably will say things like, it was easy, it was quick, I didn't have to think about it, as a dominant hand. For the non-dominant hand, things that people have tended to say to me are, I had to think about it, I was clumsy, it doesn't look as good, I would need a lot more practice to get good at this, it was uncomfortable. Those words describe using your preferences and not using your preferences. In the MBTI, the language they use is preferences. So our personalities are about how we prefer to understand, exist, and respond to the world. So preference is a nice word because it doesn't say you can't do the other thing. You did just use your non-dominant hand to sign your name, if you followed along, but you probably don't like to do that as much. You don't prefer that. And the other that you prefer is going to come more naturally to you. You're also going to have more practice at it, so it's probably going to get you better results. With personality types, it's the same way. So if you're acting out of a personality type that it comes naturally to you, that you prefer, that you've practiced a lot, you're probably going to be able to kind of get good results. But sometimes that's not the right way to approach a situation. So, in some cases, maybe you need to use both hands. And one hand needs to be doing something even if it's not your non-dominant hand. So sometimes you kind of wish you practiced a little more on that hand. But sometimes you don't need to worry about it and you just go with the side of you that's stronger. Types are very similar, and I'll talk about what those different opposites are. There's 4 different scales that are used in the MBTI, and those are what those letters come from. On each scale, there are 2 ends to that spectrum, and you fall on one or the other. There is no middle according to the MBTI. Although you might be close to it, technically you are on one side or the other. So if at any point you feel like it's difficult for you to figure out which end of that scale you're on, imagine a teeter-totter with a ball in it. That ball's going to go to one side or the other. It can't stay in the middle. Something's going to tilt. And so even if it's the slightest difference, label yourself as that side. Moving on, we're going to validate some of the pieces that go into creating your type. So the first activity is just to think about, how do you unwind after a long day at work or at school? Pause the video now and write just a few, a couple sentences, a few words about what you would be doing. Now that you've written down what you would be doing after a long day at work or at school, there are probably some patterns that are going to come up in what you wrote. So think about, do you fit more along the lines of someone who's going to go out and party, or who's going to call a friend, or process their day with a family member? Or are you someone who is going to kind of sit back with some tea and your dog on the couch and a book? These are 2 examples of what an extrovert or an introvert might look like unwinding after a long day at work or at school. Now keep in mind, there are some things that might look like one that actually are the other. So when I say calling a friend, introverts do that too, of course. And extroverts sometimes like to sit on the couch with their dog and a cup of tea. But sort of the overall pattern in your life, do you tend to seek to renew your energy by interacting with others and interacting with the external world? Or do you tend to seek to recover your energy by going into yourself and spending time reflecting and getting that energy back from your internal world? So we'll talk more about that in a little bit. Our next activity is for you to describe this image to me. So take a second, write down a few words, say like 10 different words you would use or phrases to describe what you see here. Now that you've done that, I'll tell you a little bit about some patterns that may have come up for you. So this type is about how you perceive the world. Our last one was about how you get energy. This one is about how you perceive the world. And so people who perceive the world in terms of details would be more sensors. They would be people who would be more likely to talk about the concrete aspect of this thing. So you might talk about the colors and the shapes that are in it. Those who are more intuitive people, which is described by the letter N, because I is already taken by introversion, those who are intuitive, Ns, would describe more about the picture and kind of the whole. So they might talk about what it is, what kind of place it is, what maybe people are doing there that you might even have to extrapolate to talk about. So they're going beyond the details and the concreteness of what is here. We'll talk more about those differences soon too. Next, imagine yourself as a little league coach. You have 15 players and you've been invited to the playoffs, but you can only bring 10. Bear in mind, I don't know sports, never played any kind of little kid sports. So don't mind the numbers, just imagine that you have this dilemma. You have 15 kiddos and you get to bring 10 of them to this wonderful opportunity. How do you make this decision? What's important to consider? Pause and write those things down. Now that you've written down what you would keep in mind when deciding which players to bring to the Little League playoffs, I'll tell you a little about some patterns that might have come up and you can decide what you fit into. So this is about thinking versus feeling. Thinkers are people who are more likely to talk about who's going to help them score, who's going to help them to get farther in the playoffs. Thinking is not just about competition, but they can look a little bit harsher to those who are feelers. A feeler is likely to say what kids put in the best effort and which kids are going to be most hurt if they don't get to go. Whereas a thinker might say which kid is going to have a hard time fundraising and might not get to go, because of that. So they may be a little more practical than the feelers who are going to focus on the relationships. And here's one more. Imagine, think about your last vacation, or imagine that you have just gotten the opportunity to go on a vacation. It's up to you to plan. How do you decide how to use your time? Pause and write a little bit about how you might expect to plan out one of your days there. Now that you've written about how you plan one of your days on vacation, I'll tell you some of the patterns that come up with this one according to the types. This is about judging and perceiving. An important thing to keep in mind is judging is not the negative connotation that it tends to have in everyday language. We tend to, think of people who are judgy as being critical. This is not about that. This type is about your way of structuring the world around you. So thinking and feeling was about your decision making, and now judging and perceiving is about how you structure your world. So for example, planning a vacation. So if you are someone who will plan a vacation in a way that is highly structured, you know what to do and when, you may be more of a judger. If you are a perceiver, you might be more likely to leave some things open-ended. So you might have a day where you say, I think I'm just going to go to this beachy area and see what's there to do. A judger would say, okay, we can do that for like 2 hours, and then we need to go to this place, and we have an appointment here, and this place closes at this time. So they're going to be a little more careful about the structure of the details. It is different than sensing, though, because we're talking about the structure you place onto your world rather than how you're perceiving it. There are details in either of those functions that you might have. Another way to think about this one, this two set of characteristics, is to think about how you work in a long-term project. So are you someone who, when you get a long-term project, even if you wait till the last minute, will have a pattern of accomplishing a task, and then accomplishing a different task, and then a different task, until you have kind of whittled away the different things that need to be done pretty systematically. And you might even be able to lay out all those steps ahead of time. Or are you someone who, whether you start early or start late, you're going to leave things pretty open-ended, you're going to kind of stew on some ideas maybe, and then later as the deadline approaches, it's all going to start to come together at that point. And it's not necessarily that you think you work better under pressure or don't. It's not about procrastination. Either type can be procrastinators. But it's more about that pattern of how much structure are you imposing? Are you one who likes to pull all your materials together at the end and say, here's what I see emerging from those? That would be more of a perceiver's way of doing things. Or are you someone who says, this is what I need to do here, 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 and here. This is the plan I'll follow to get this done, no matter how much time you have. That would be more of a judger's way of doing things. Okay, so you can look at this image and it might give you some reminders of the different types. Now we're going to go into our more formal validation activity. That was just to sort of introduce you to how you already are demonstrating your type. I'm going to give you some list of qualities and have you mark on a scale where you think you fall. So on your paper, draw this scale. You can use just the letters if you want to, or if you need to pause and draw in more detail with all of the language, you can do that. This is a wonderful scale to have to kind of summarize this, and we're going to see where you fall on it. So we have those MyPlan results. This may or may not match them. Like I said, there can be different errors that can come up when you're taking a test online. Right now there can be as well, but we're hoping that this will give us a different angle of viewing your type. The way we think about type in MBTI is that there's actually a true type that's buried deep in you that we can't really measure. There's something just a little too deep for us to really get to, but we're trying from different angles to view it from the outside. And so hopefully we'll get pretty darn close to understanding what your real type is. So this is an example of what I mean by marking on these scales. So if I think I'm quite introverted, I would put an X here. If I think I'm a little bit of a feeler, it's maybe even a little hard for me to tell if I'm a feeler or a thinker, but I think I'm more feeler, I might put an X here. And we'll do that for each of these lines. So you would also have one for SN and for JP as well by the time we finish. So you'll do that after each pairing. So take a look at these qualities, and I'll just let you pause and read through them. Think about which of these fits you better, and on that scale, mark which one best suits you, and how much so. When you're ready, you can move on to the next slide. Here's the next slide, between sensing and intuition. Which of these sets do you think best describes you? Sensing on the left and intuition on the right. When you've figured out which one fits you and how much, mark that on the scale as well. and then hit play to move on. Here's our third set. Again, you can pause to think about which one best fits you and mark it, and then play to move on. And here's our last set for the judging and perceiving. Which of these sets of words do you think best fits you? Hit play and move on when you're ready, after you've marked on the scales. So you now should have X's across your 4 lines. What I'd like you to do is circle the letter closest to each X. So in the example I showed you earlier, there was a red X close to the I, and there was a blue X close to the F. And what I would have also done, because I'm basing this off of my type, is I would have had an X on the N side as well as the P side. So my letters would have been circling the I, the N, the F, and the P. You can see near the top left, on the inner part of the green, there's INFP, and that would be my type. And if you go on Canvas, you can print out, I would recommend printing this out. The sheath is very similar looking to this one, although it does not have color. It's got each of the types and a nice full description of them. So I want you to find the type that MyPlan.com gave you and circle that one. And then also find the type that we just validated for you using our activities and circle that one. And they may be different. I know for me, the INFP and the INTP have sometimes been a little hard for me to tell between. I think I also have sometimes come up as an INFJ. So what you want to do then, knowing that there are a few different types that different kinds of assessments, including our activities, might say are yours, read through those descriptions. What that does is it pulls all the different pieces of your type together and gives you the bigger picture of it. And my intuitive is liking this. My big picture intuitive likes doing that. So look at that as well, because we've gone through the details for those of you who are sensors. As you look at those, what I want you to do is to cross through, to strike out anything that is not true for you, and to circle the things that are true for you. And that might also help you to compare which one seems to be a best fit. In the end of it, what I want you to do is to pick the one that's the best fit for you. And the way that you might want to do that, especially if you're a feeler, is to think about which one best resonates with me. And if you're a thinker, maybe challenge yourself to think of it this way too. You know, to feel for which one best resonates with me, which one feels the most true of me. Definitely don't try to pick based on what you want to be, should be, or told you should be, things like that, but really pick deep down which one best represents you. That is most likely going to be the closest we can get today to your true type. Something to keep in mind is that your environment might affect this. So something I've heard that's interesting is that typically graduate school makes people into J's because it demands a lot of structure, and so people become more judgers in order to cope with that, although their natural preference might be to perceive and to leave things less structured. Another example is our society highly values extroverts. There are other meanings to the word extroversion, by the way, so that's something to keep in mind, but still, the qualities of extroversion, according to the MBTI, are highly valued in terms of behaviors like seeking out company of others, wanting to be chatty, and also kind of the outgoingness tends to come along with that, even though that may or may not be characteristic of the true MBTI extrovert type. A lot of the qualities associated with MBTI extroversion are true for the extroversion that our society loves to see. And introverts sometimes can feel a little bit less valued. It's important to keep in mind both of these are really important. All of these different qualities and preferences are all very important. But what I was saying was that ease may be more preferred in our society, and so people who are naturally preferring introversion might start to show more extroversion, even if their true preference is not that. The way you would know that you're leaning into a preference that is not truly yours would be you might get tired with it. You may tire out faster. Think about if I had you sign a lot of checks with your non-dominant hand. You would get pretty tired of that pretty fast. This is very similar. So that's one way that you can kind of spot if you're living out a preference that is not yours. Now there's nothing wrong with that. You're probably strengthening that opposite preference, but think about how much you could be doing if you were living through your natural preference. So, imagine how many more checks you sign, how much more legible that would be, and how much else you would be able to do after that if I allowed you to use your dominant hand to sign, that couple dozen checks that I was going to have you do, or maybe more. So that pretty much sums up what I would like for you guys to know about MBTI and finding your type. Something really great about type is just to keep in mind that it really can guide you not only in career, but in a lot of areas of your life. You can use it to help you, even decide, things to say no to, things to say yes to. There's lots and lots of opportunities where you can reflect on your type and put that to use. So in the slides, I actually am asking you to reflect on how your type may exist in the workplace. That's just one of many places that type as a factor. Your personality is always a factor in life. And so, go through those slides for this assignment to complete your participation for today, for this component, and reflect on, how do those things match for you? When it says people who have this type that you say you have, so if you say you're an E and it says E's in the workplace typically are da-da-da, say, oh, wow, yeah, I totally do that. I didn't realize that. Tell me about those things. Tell me, this is how this is true for me. This is what that looks like when I do this thing. Obviously, you won't have the space to speak to every single one of those points, but pick the ones that jump out at you as either really, really fitting for you, or as, like, this doesn't fit for me. I wonder if that really is my type. Because this is an ongoing process of really figuring out and validating your type. You can continue to validate your type, but this is something to get you started with that, and I look forward to reading your reflections about that.